this morning, or morning here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm here with the cast of Life, the movie. So please introduce yourselves. Campbell.
Hi, I'm Campbell, the director and writer of Life.
Excellent.
I'm Tania, I play JJ.
Excellent.
Actress. For my sins. For my sins.
And Robyn, do you want to go ahead and
Sorry. And I'm Robyn, and I'm an actress, and I play Elle.
Excellent. Yay, so let's start with, and I guess the obvious question, Mr. Campbell, why Stunt Life, and what was the motivation behind the story and behind making that a movie?
Stud Life started off with a love for London and showing the London that's very often not seen in cinema or even TV, which is a multicultural, multi-gendered, multi-sexual orientation. It's a mad place. It's a very inclusive, wonderful place, and it stands as an island in the whole of the UK in a way. People describe themselves as Londoners. That was one of the main reasons behind the film. And also, I wanted to have a film about friendship between two often groups that are considered opposing, which is the white gay man and the black stud lesbian. And that's because those groups exist, those friendships exist, but we never see them on cinema. And lastly, because I wanted to show a masculine of center woman in the center of the frame, starring in having a leading role in the movie.
So then I'll ask a couple of questions as to touch on what you just said. So you're currently in London now, right? You and Tania. Robyn, you're not. So that's a question about your experiences in London and how they're reflected and how they're different from what's in the movie. And then two, how much of the movie actually reflects, Campbell, your life and the lives of Robyn and Tania?
The movie doesn't actually reflect my life. It's based on observations. The only thing that's could be exactly about my life is a toilet scene. And this is an experience for a lot of masculine of center people. When we enter what has been assigned as a safe woman-only space, we're very often policed by other women who are scared because what they see is a man, and with me, they see a black man, so that heightens the fear even more. But that's the only thing that I would say that's from my own experience. The rest is just from observation, watching people, in London, people I know, people I don't even know, just by seeing them on the club scene. It's entirely an imaginary concept, even though many people have found it relates to their lives. That's because I am quite good at showing what people's lives are.
Excellent. And I love that bathroom scene. And I love JJ's response. So she didn't get mad. She's like, boom, I belong here. So Tania, how was it playing that scene? Because a lot of stuff happened in that bathroom.
Yeah. A lot of stuff happened in that bathroom. My God, that bathroom was like Piccadilly Circus, man.
It was like Hampstead Heath.
Or Hampstead Heath, yeah. That scene was a lot of fun to do. I mean, it was edited a little bit because she doesn't just kind of say become a female, we're exposing her. She kind of then goes on further in the non-edited version of unzipping her trousers and what have you. So that was cute. That was fun.
Excellent. And then so Robyn, and then your character Elle is also in that bathroom scene. She's kind of trying to figure out what's going on with JJ. She hasn't called after the first meeting. What was your take on that scene?
Well, I think Elle is not used to someone not calling her right away after she gives her number out. So I think that was about power, really. She comes in there and she, at first, I think feels like she doesn't have the upper hand anymore, and then she takes the power back because that's the position she likes to be in. In the initial part of a relationship, I think she likes to feel that she's in control. which is a complete lie because she's never in control, really. So.
Like to maintain that illusion. So that kind of takes us back. So Campbell, as you wrote this script, and Tania and Robyn, as you played parts in the script, how were you inspired by past, lesbian movies and media? So I was thinking like, oh, there's some parallels to Watermelon Woman. There are a lot of parallels to the book Stone Butch Blues. And I was like, are those parallels I'm just pulling because that's media I'm familiar with, or was that intentional?
Are you talking about how inspired the film was by other films?
Yes, if it was.
Well, yeah. Watermelon Woman is an iconic film. I mean, it was the first black lesbian film ever made, feature film ever made, and so it's gone down in history. And I'm inspired by Cheryl's play with form and content. Like, she mixes documentary and fictionalized efforts in her films, and so do I as well. And I also wanted to make something that was quick to do. We shot it in 10 days, which is like phenomenal. Quick to do in that limited amount of time, but telling a story. And why I wanted to make JJ a photographer, and as you mentioned, in Stranger Inside, one of the leads is a photographer, one of the women in the prison. I think photography allows us to document and access ourselves in a way to write ourselves into history. And what I did was I used Della Grace Volcano, who's an iconic transgender photographer. It's his images that we see of the wedding, in order to write his work back in history as well. So he's taken the images that are the wedding photos, but in the film, the images on the wall are actually Della Grace Volcano's images as well. So it's like a double play on, we're here, don't forget us, never forget us, we have a legacy.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the question I had while I was watching the movie. Is there significance on the other images on the wall as JJ is recording their YouTube videos? So
the other images on the wall, yeah, and it's important because Del uses people from the queer community in his photos, and obviously we've got professional actors here, but I mixed it up. I mixed the film up with also using queer iconic figures in London in the movie as well. So that leaves its legacy too, and people recognize their friends internationally when they see them. People have recognized a DJ who's Australian, there's a writer, Stella Duffy, in there, Julie McNamara, there, Laszlo Perlman. So there are all these kind of performers who are part of the film as well. And you will see other Celesbians or Celes trans people in the film,
And so then that question out to Robyn and Tania. So as you acted your roles, how did you anchor to kind of past queer icons, and how did you further, as you acted out the parts, how did you begin to develop, lesbian icons? Does that make sense? Can you hear me?
For me, I didn't even. I don't know if this is going to get me in trouble with Campbell. I didn't even think of lesbian icons or anything like that. I just thought of Elle and who she was and what she wanted, and JJ and how she felt about JJ and how she felt about her own life and what she did for a living, and how that I was just immersed in who Elle was and what Elle wanted.
Right.
So I didn't even think of anything like that, actually.
You don't have to, because you're the actor. And I'm glad that that's all you thought of in a way, because you brought that to the role.
Right. That is true. Like, Elle is a very intense character. And then Tania, for you and JJ. So did you reference any historical queer icons, or were you thinking about how you were constructing future queer icons as you acted the part of JJ?
Can you say that again? Because we didn't quite get that. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So the question is for Tania. So as you acted the role of JJ, were there any queer historical figures that you kind of referenced mentally as you acted that part?
Okay. Similar to Robyn, no. And I think with any kind of piece, I just looked at it as a character and approached it. You know, who is JJ? What's her world? Where she come from? And looked at her backstory. And there wasn't anybody. I mean, like Campbell was saying that you observe people. So I would observe people. I went to clubs and I observed people, but there wasn't kind of any one person that she was kind of based on, who I drew inspiration from in terms of an icon.
Right. Excellent. And so that brings us to the next, set of questions on playing a role that's not based off of personal experience, and that's more based off of research. So I'll start with Robyn again. So Elle is a dominatrix, which I'll put in the larger category of a sex worker, if you feel that's correct. So how did you research playing that part for Studlife Life?
Well, I read a lot online, and I spoke to people, and I was in contact with a dominatrix via email. We emailed a couple times, and I asked a few questions, and that's how, really. And I mean, Elle is so. I mean, Campbell and Tania know me. It's so far outside of who I am. It's not just the dominatrix. She's a very, very sexually confident woman, and she's lesbian. So all of these things are like the opposite of me. But just through talking, and Tania as well, talking so much with Tania, she helped me a lot through especially the sexual freeness and confidence that Elle has. I think there's a lot of talking with those two amazing women about that helped me to get out of my shell and to find her.
Right. Excellent. So what was the biggest nugget, like when you were researching the role, like the dominatrix aspect of Elle's character, what was the biggest surprise? Like you're like, oh, I would have never thought about that, and that was your biggest insight to the other people?
I actually didn't realize that there was no sex. Most don't actually have sex. It's literally providing the service of dominating that person, because that is what that person wants, needs, and it's a very different. It's so not sexual.
Right.
That was what was surprising. The person who's actually doing the dominating.
Right. Right. And yeah, and I find that very interesting. And I think the biggest line for me out of that that scene was when Elle says, "I learned pretty quickly that I could make more money using my body than I could with my mind." And it was insightful, but I also found it pretty sad. So how was that for you playing that character? And Campbell, what were you thinking when you wrote that?
Well, I was thinking, that's a line I wrote because what I've noticed now in the kind of, I guess it's a pornification of society, but also in the way how women's sexuality is appropriated for capital, in a way, rather than appropriated for their own power. So you'll find women get a lot more money for selling their bodies, either, a singer who will show her tits, or somebody who will sell sex to guys through prostitution, than actually if she used her mind. Women's intellect is never valued as much as, her genitalia. And I think we have to look at that, not to say our genitalia is invaluable, but that's the only thing. Our sexuality, our sex, our bodies that's what's, you know, ultimately there's a price to pay, and, you know, people can pay for it and get it. You know, it was a comment on that in a way. When do we get valued for our minds?
Right. So yeah, for me that was a very, especially as a femme-identified person, I was like, wow. And I guess for me that was never my construction, right? So to see L's character kind of struggle with that. So then I'll switch it over.
Sorry, I'm so just to like I just wanna like I don't think, just in response to that as well, that Elle was struggling with it. I think she was very, I know she says, I knew I could make more money using my body than my mind, but she's using her mind in that sense because she's going, you know what, I'm going to take control over this. I know that I can make money this way, and I have no problem with that. This is what I do. This is how I make my money. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of who I am, and that's part of the breakup. Because she's like, this is who I am. If you can't accept that, then that's on you.
Yeah. And you know, just to add, I think a lot of times we have to remember that the areas where initially a lot of gay clubs were red light areas. Our communities are quite close. You know, sex workers and lesbians were lovers and close back in the day. You know, when there was Stonewall, it wasn't, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Lawyer, Doctor who were fighting for our rights in the riot. It was transgendered people, people of color, sex workers. Those people that are considered low life, still are, were the ones at the forefront of fighting, you know, forefront of actually fighting, physically fighting for our rights. So, you know, having a sex worker in the film was also about paying homage to people who are often ignored and you know, we're snide about now, but, you know, they embraced us before other people did.
Right.
I
think that's great context to provide. So I'm glad that you had that discussion, right? So that's great insight. So then I'll switch to Tania and playing the role of JJ, which JJ is a very masculine and centered person. Tania, you appear not to be, so can you elaborate on that?
That was interesting, as Robyn will tell you. So I guess the first point of call was to, you know, understand who she was, and then to find her. I always start, when I look at a character, I always kind of start with her body, you know, her physicality, and mine and JJ's are very different. So we rehearsed a lot, and we spoke a lot, and that, you know, gave me kind of a clear path. But then came the ultimate transformation, and Campbell said to me, "Go and get a boy's haircut." So I did, and that was the first point.
Go and get it, more boys.
And then she said, "No, it's still not masculine enough. Go and get it again." So I did, and this happened maybe thrice or 4 times until it was perfect. And then, you know, it didn't go with my wardrobe, so I kind of, and I wanted to embrace her world and her body in any case, so I binded, and I borrowed some clothes, and I took some clothes from wardrobe and what have you. And I remember putting on the clothes and looking in the mirror, and I jumped back, and I hid, you know, I hid out of the mirror, and then I kind of, you know, I just hid in to see, oh my God, who is that? And she was totally different to me.
Right.
And then when I went out on the street, Campbell X saw me as a young black boy, and that was really interesting, because the London that you speak of, that we so fondly, or I so fondly love, became really isolating and a bit mean. It was a bit mean to the young black boy that I was. And after 3 days, I started getting really pissed off, you know, to people's responses, because women, I don't know, I'd get budged and barred. I was either ignored or feared. Those were the 2 responses that I got. So after about 3 days of it and getting really worked up, excuse me, I decided that I can't carry on and walk around with all this angst in my body. So I decided that I would be a gentleman, you know, and just be courteous. But it takes a lot of work, because you have to kind of second guess what people's reactions are going to be. You see it coming and you get in there first to be that beautiful gentleman that says, you know what, don't barge me, I will just allow you to kind of walk past and make a thing of it, as it were. So yeah, JJ's experience in her world was alien. It was very alienating. But it was fun as well, though. Sorry, it was really fun because I got to be kind of cheeky in a youthful way that I haven't done for a while.
But also,
you go, Campbell.
no, I'm just going to say, very often when you have people of color in movies or movies that are LGBT, people think that you're using amateurs. And what I really wanted to do was to use professional actors, because professional actors bring a nuance to roles in a way that I think if you have the experience but are not a professional actor, you can't bring. And you know, it's to Nia's and Robyn's credit that they came out of their own personal experience to take the risk to do these roles as women of color, because a lot of times actresses who are women of color very, very rarely take risky roles, or what's considered risky roles.
Right.
And so, you know, I felt blessed to have them on the shoot, but also to have their wonderful performances in the film. That, you know, it really kind of gave the film some meat, I thought.
And I 100% agree with that. And just to go back to the role of JJ, I know. So it was. I mean, the acting was very convincing, downright to the body movement and the mannerisms. So, did you study?
It should win awards, man.
I mean, yeah, I would give that. I was like that is not that's not a stud. Like, that is very convincing. Because I know there are times when I'm like, you know what, tonight I'm gonna dress up, I'm gonna do the whole stud thing, and then by the time I actually go out, I end up in a dress and heels. And it's like, it's a whole. It's not just putting on clothes. It's the movement and it's a mindset.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just the clothes.
Right. So, yeah, Tania, who did you model yourself after? Who were you constructing in your mind? Was it your father? Was it, one more time?
I'm so sorry, I didn't quite catch the last bit. Who did I?
Yeah, so who did you, was there a particular person that you modeled your movements and your mannerisms after?
My movements or
Everything.
Oh, everything, okay. No, not one particular person. I kind of went into the clubs, and it's there in the script, I think. You know, Campbell does this great thing. She really writes characters quite well. So the clues are all there in terms of where she's thinking, where she's at. And we rehearsed a lot. Well, I say a lot. We rehearsed over 2 weeks, but we had this dialogue where I understood exactly what Campbell wanted. So by the time we got to filming it, we were able to execute it with one take. You know, because I think maybe on 2 scenes only we got to do 2 takes. So it wasn't one person. I did look at, you know, young black boys, because obviously that's how I was perceived. But yeah, I think it was just more so. I think it was just written. It's written there in terms of where she thinks, where she's at, and of course she smokes a lot as well, so that would have something to do with it.
She also Tania also like changed so much from when, because I knew Tania before the film, and how she started to change is somewhere in the middle of rehearsals. She was also different with me. Like, and even when we'd have like a lunch break or something, and you and I would be walking on the street, she'd always make sure that she was on the outside, so she was on the side that traffic was on. She carried my bags all the time, so like, and that didn't happen before. You know, we were 2 women, and other people should be carrying our bags. You know, that's how she suddenly like was really protective of me, and I felt like I had this strapping young man looking after me during the filming. It was brilliant. I loved it.
She became to even off camera, it seems like.
Yeah, because you don't leave it. You know, and at home as well, JJ, like literally, she filled my world in every essence, going to the shop. Because she can be quite curt at times, I think JJ can, just very direct in her language. She doesn't
use coyness.
Yeah, not at all. And she's quite stringent with her words, so she just kind of, you know, which can appear to be abrupt. So Seb, the guy who plays Seb, actor that plays Seb, we would go to the shop together, what have you, and he would apologise to me sometimes. Do you remember that, Robyn?
Yeah.
But it's also in a way it's a, you know, like Robyn talks about the being, what's the word, gentlemanly, but that's also another way of being a stud. Very often studs get the reputation of being quite misogynistic or being, you know, badly behaved, and there are studs like that, obviously, people who haven't been educated in a feminist way, but there are other studs who value people around them and who behave in a respectful way, and also who behave respectfully to their partners.
Right.
You know, and so that's the kind of stud that JJ was and Tania was portraying in JJ.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's definitely what I saw. And when I saw Tania's portrayal of JJ, I could definitely relate to that too. That's quintessential women in my life, so I appreciate that. So when I went to screenings of Stud Life, the one comment that, like, people love the movie, it's very sexual, the soundtrack is amazing, but they were like, wow, that relationship moved really quickly. It's like, wow, is that still a first date? Like, their rings, so walk me through that. How did that happen in this script?
All right. Oh, okay. People got the impression it was the first date. It wasn't the first date.
No.
It was a time lapse in between when they were sort of running around London. So it was meant to be like, you know, 6 months later. And there was a line, but it was cut out because it was deemed to be too obvious. And the imagery was supposed to let you know that there was a time lapse, but it wasn't a specific time lapse, you know, whatever time lapse is in people's minds. In my mind, it was 6 months, but, you know, there was some time. It wasn't the first day when they did the rings.
So, and I think, so that question wasn't, so I think it was, so they met at the park that afternoon after, you know, the bathroom scene, and then they go back to Al's house. Yeah,
they had sex the first date. They did.
And then
some people do, you know.
Yeah, there's no judgment there. There's absolutely no judgment there. And then, you know, in terms of becoming emotionally connected and involved in the rings, so the feedback that I tend to hear at different screens is like, wow, that happened really quickly, right? And so kind of like, do you feel like that's prevalent in lesbian relationships? Do you feel like that was just a connection between Elle and JJ in that construction of the development of their relationship?
Our thing is sort of like there's a beach ball of death. It's frozen.
Oh, okay. I was like a beach ball. Oh, because I can still hear you on my end.
Oh, okay. It wasn't really a comment. You know, I think lesbians do get together very, very quickly, and I think gay people do, but I think it's also a British thing. You know, we don't have a dating culture in Britain as you do in the States.
Okay.
So people hook up, you know, quite quickly and say they're in a relationship, and I think that's a particular British thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, living in New York, I have to say it's really different. The dating out here. Yeah.
Okay,
really.
and that's good to know. Yes, because in the U.S. dating. So my next comment or observation is, so JJ is. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. So it's sort of it keeps crashing, but it's okay now.
Okay. So JJ is what is currently referred to, or I currently refer to as a touch me not stud.
Oh yeah.
To describe like both Robyn and Tania and Campbell, as you wrote it, those screens where it becomes those scenes where it becomes obvious that JJ is a touch me not stud.
Touch me not stud. That's like a phenomenon. If you just Google that on YouTube, you'll see that.
Right. So
you know?
I guess more like, why was JJ written as a touch me not stud, and how was it?
Why? Because I think it's there's two things. I didn't want the sex scene to be like the sex scenes you always see in gay films, in lesbian films. You know, they always seem very smooth, unproblematic. Everybody knows what everybody's supposed to be doing. Everybody, you know, you're a woman, I'm a woman, therefore we know each other. You know, I didn't want that. because I think it's much more complicated, and sometimes it's quite awkward if you're with somebody who's very different to you. Sometimes it's bang, wonderful, sometimes it's not. And my films, you're not going to see like unproblematic queerness. You're not going to see everybody's all fine and happy queerness. You're going to see something that's a little bit more complex, a little bit layered. So the introduction of a Touch Me Not stud shows, actually, you think you know me, but you don't. So we need to have a conversation. And so that's what that was about. We need to have a conversation. But that should happen with anybody hooking up, You can't just jump into somebody and assume you know their body and assume you know their boundaries. There needs to be a discussion anyway, touch me not or not. So that's just having that, it's a mechanism for having that conversation. Where is right to touch you? Where is not?
Tania, Robyn, do you have anything to add to that? My favorite line from that scene is like, Al likes to lick labia. I was like, for weeks quoting that.
It's my favorite line too. Everything from the buffet.
Well, in a way, do you know what? I want one.
No, I just said, no, you go.
No, what I wanted to do, and this is where Robyn was fantastic in the audition, is I wanted to show active female desire for other females. And if you're feminine, a lot of times you're seen as inactive, as passive, not showing active desire, not wanting it, not demanding it. And Elle is not that kind of woman, and there are many feminine femme lesbians who are active. It doesn't mean they can't be submissive sexually, which is a different thing, because she does submit sexually to JJ, even though she's a dominatrix in her work. But people need to understand the distinction between being passive and being submissive. So she's not passive. She desires. She wants to have sex with other women. And people think because you're a feminine lesbian, you're an inauthentic lesbian. You're not real. You're always on the hunt for some guy, and that you're the one that people do things to. You don't do things to other people. So I wanted to break that right out, because to show, she's strong. She knows what she wants, and she wants JJ, and she desires JJ.
And women, Elle is not interested in men in any way.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that construction and that portrayal of a femme lesbian. So, and I appreciated the fact that Elle was very powerful.
Thank
you. Tania, did you have anything to add?
No.
It's been said.
What's interesting when we, because like Robyn says, we're so different from our characters, and we did talk a hell of a lot about sex during this shoot, didn't we? And I think just like
everybody did.
Everybody did. We all did. We all just, it's like, I don't know you, but you know so much about me that I haven't even shared with friends. Yeah. And I think that's like this, because it's so tight as well. You have to build those trust things. So it was just really interesting to be. Oh God, I'm saying too much. I'm about to say too much. But like you said, Robyn, she was very different to you and myself, and this whole idea of what you can do, what you can't do. It was a real education for me. Like, I have never come across a touch me not stud before, and I generally don't like the word no in my own life anyway, so in any aspect of it.
Must be a success.
So
yeah,
okay, and because I felt like that scene between JJ and Elle, from what I've heard of the community, was very accurate. Right? So I was like, oh, that's something interesting. So as we wrap up, what are some insights that you hope people take away from the movie? And that's a question to all three of you.
What are the insights we can take away about it? You wanna do, Robyn?
I think the main thing is that it is a story of friendship and of love. And what I certainly, when I came to it, I wasn't thinking of, and I understand that it obviously it's a film with a stud lesbian lead character, and it's, you know, gay characters and all of that. I do understand that, and I do understand that it's important. But the main thing is that it's a story about friendship and love, and it's a story that everyone can relate to. It's not just a lesbian story or a stud story or a gay story. It's a human story. People fall in love and have friendship that is important in their life all the time. And I've had friends who have watched the film who are gay or lesbian, and I've had friends who are straight who have watched the film, and everyone has gotten the same thing from it. It's not a story that's only for a particular person, is what I want to say about it.
Excellent.
And I think just to add to what Robyn said, really, I think it was Campbell's parents who came along and watched the film, you know, so it's not just about sexuality, you know, people who identify it, it's not just a sexual orientation, it's also, you know, culturally and whatever age people kind of relate, because it is the human story. What I will say is that do look out for Stud Life, because there will be more stories of Robyn and JJ and Seb and Smack Jack and Al and their misdemeanors and their adventures. So hopefully that will be coming to the screen at some point soon. Maybe not the big screen, maybe the small screen, but we shall be able to kind of see their lives and what happens next for JJ and Al sometime in the near future.
Yay, I'm excited.
Me too, but we're dead excited.
But also, what I would say is it's interesting what Tania said about the cultural thing as well, which often gets kind of like kind of slipped away. You know, the film is, my parents watched it, loved it, and the thing that my mother said was, this film's about the human condition. That's what she related to. But also, the scene that she liked the best was the barbershop. And in the barbershop, the woman chats in Jamaican patois. Now, you know, I wanted to introduce different voices in the film, and one of the voices that you hear in London, like on the tube, I heard this guy chatting in Jamaican, you know, he was giving the announcements, but in Jamaican patois.
Yes.
We never hear those diverse voices coming from London on cinema or TV. And in my films, I want to show that. I want to show we are London too. London is everybody, and everybody is London. So if we take away people, you know, they take that away from them.
And I definitely appreciated the accents and seeing people of color in London. So I mean, that was a very rich experience for me, because it is the default. Like if you're doing something British or in London, that it is white, right?
It tends to be, absolutely. You know,
And it's so not like that here.
It's so not like that.
London is. You can be on one bus journey, right,
Yeah.
traveling for 10 minutes, and you will hear 5 different languages, master's accents.
Yeah.
Right, Robyn?
Yeah. You know,
I mean, this is the thing that I found that was so, and why I wasn't going through any kind of major shock in that sense when I moved to New York. Because it's like that. You get on the train, and you can be in every part of the world at the same time.
Right.
You know, and I hope that this kind of filmmaking as well, and what Campbell has done here, and all these different voices and cultures and colors, I hope that becomes a phenomenon that spreads, and I just hope it continues to be like that, because it's something I have also seen in America as well. Right. You know, there isn't a lot that's shown on television and on screen with a lot of cultural diversity. I mean, we live in a culture diverse world.
Right.
Why aren't we seeing more of that? So, you know,
absolutely.
more.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is, as long as, when people see queer bodies or people of color bodies, they often think, oh, the film's about issues. It's issues. It's a problem. It's blah, blah, blah. Which is why I moved away from a kind of straight drama and did a comedy. Nobody is coming out in the film. Nobody's talking about, you know, they're a victim of racism. Right. Of course, there's a bashing, but that's kind of half of the course. But you know, JJ's not coming out. Ellie's not ashamed. They're just part of the madness and the craziness of London, and that we need to see more films like that with people of color. You know, we don't need to set ourselves up as emblems of anything. Just come out with our wonderful
victims. I'm so over seeing ourselves as victims when we're such a powerful set of people, you know. And like Campbell said, it's not. I don't feel like it was a black story. It's not a black film. It's just a London film. It's a London film now.
It's London.
Yeah. You know, even it was a gay film. It just, for me, it was just.
It's a people film, which is inhabited by queers, because we don't usually inhabit what's considered people. I put us queers in the people frame to show we are human.
I mean, it's definitely a story that is relatable to a lot of people, but I know for me it was important to see queer women of color in leading roles and living their lives and having those cultural references that I could identify to, right? And that were intentional for me. So we talked about the photographic images, and so forth, and how that was intentional to have a queer reference. And to me, that's very important, but that's my frame, right? Coming from that Sistah Sinema vantage point. So it is a story that is a human story, but I personally appreciate those queer women of color references. And so talking about queer women of color references, the sound, I don't know if they were queer women of color, but the soundtrack is amazing. How did you do that?
I'm an insomniac, so I was up late in the night trawling YouTube, and then we had a musical supervisor, Mick Clark, who was wonderful in getting us some of the high-end music. So I used music from queer people of color cultures, but also from people of color cultures as well, to mix it up, because I wanted to have artists who were unsigned. It's all part of my legacy thinking. Have them there, they're promoted, their names out there, their music's out there, as well as, you know, having a little bit more established music artists as well. And also to have music that is the music of clubs in London. You know, there are queer clubs in London that play that music. It's not all techno, trance, dancey stuff. You know, they are. So I wanted to show that. I know.
It's okay on its day.
It's okay, but you know, I wanted to show, like, you know, you can be a person of color and still have your own cultural references. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to perform something else and be queer.
Right. And so yeah, that soundtrack is amazing, and I can't wait to buy it and own it. So yeah, I was like, I think that was a large part of the reason why I was so excited about the film when I heard the trailer and the music accompanying the trailer. I was like, I can't wait to watch that live. And it met all my expectations. So as did this Google Hangout. It was so cool to talk with y'all about the movie. It took a lot of takes, but I'm glad.
We got there.
Yes, and super happy. Beautiful work. I look forward to seeing more stories and continuing to work with all of y'all. It's amazing. Y'all are truly talented. And thank you.
Thank to Robyn and to Nia for creating wonderful roles. You created it. Okay.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for inviting us.
My pleasure. Okay, have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.